One of the things that you can do, particularly if you're an English speaker, fluent English speaker, is you can teach ESL. Now, when I was in Canada before I left, I thought about it, and I knew some people that actually had gone to China for 3 or 4 or 5 years, had an amazing experience teaching English. And then I would look at it and I said, well, I don't know if I want to spend $1,000, $1,200 with these courses that were being advertised in Canada, and I forgot all about it. And then a month ago, I was teaching English as a second language in Poland, and I did it as a volunteer for Just Speak in Poland. And they every week or weekend they will have a retreat somewhere in Poland where they do conversational English. So they didn't want me to teach. They wanted me to speak English with Polish students that didn't want to speak English. They did, but it was really easy to fall back into old habits. And so I spent a week doing that. And it was very interesting because I needed no training. I needed nothing. And from there, I learned of a company called Anglotown, and they work in a number of European countries. And again, it's a volunteer position. But if you put a $50 deposit down and you go to 3 of their events, which are usually 5 days long, and you participate, and then you take a short test, you get certified as an English ESL teacher. And I thought, wow, that's really cool. So first of all, when you're teaching English as a second language, you can volunteer and get experience and learn. And usually in exchange for the volunteering, they will give you free room and board. Once you've got a little bit of experience, you graduate to some of the more bigger schools, shall we say, and you actually work at a school, do the curriculum, teach people everything that they need to know, and you get paid. And the one of the most prestigious ones actually is in Madrid. And everyone wants to go and spend 2 weeks in Madrid at their courses because they're absolutely phenomenal. But it opens up a whole new way of you traveling, because not only are there many, many places where people want to practice English and learn English, there are many, many companies that are willing to. So here's where your trade-off is, right? Like a place like Workaway will say, okay, you give 5 hours a day, 5 days a week, you teach people how to speak English, we will feed you and we will house you so you don't have to worry about any of that. You're only working 25 hours a week. Or you can go someplace, they'll hire you, now you've got to get rent, you have to look after your rent, you have to look after your food, you have to look after all those. So you kind of need to balance which way you want to do it. If you want to go short term, which is what I want to do, then I get a free week in Poland and I get to meet 10 or 20 or 15 Polish students or from other countries, and so you get to build a really neat network. So there's a couple ways that you can approach teaching English as a second language.
Absolutely, Scott. And just a quick background on myself. One of my first ever careers was an ESL teacher. My first job was a sandwich artist at Subway. My second job was a bank teller at Scotiabank. And my third job was teaching English in Japan. A quick little backstory is that when I finished my degree back in Vancouver, BC, Canada, wasn't sure what to do in my life. I had a degree in psychology. It's not really a huge job market with a BA in psychology. So what I did is I actually went over to Tokyo, Japan, and I taught English. And, I wasn't qualified. I mean, all I did, I am a native speaker. I was born and raised in Vancouver, BC, Canada. So English is my native tongue. Even though I have Indian ethnicity, I'm still, born and bred in British Columbia. The other factor is that I had a university degree. And thirdly is I ended up doing a TESOL. And a quick little story here. There's a few different certificates you can get, and I'll outline them. There's one called TESOL, which stands for Teaching English as a Second Language, TESOL, TESL. Then there's something called TEFL, which is Teaching English as a Foreign Language. And there's another one called CELTA, which is a UK-based teaching certificate. And then there's Delta, and there's a few other ones. But there's also another one called TESOL, TESOL, Teaching English to Speakers of Other Languages. And they're more or less equivalent. I think CELTA and Delta, they have a really good international reputation. Sometimes with things like TESOL, TEFL, and TESOL, I hope I'm pronouncing all of those right, the issue is that sometimes the schools teaching them are kind of fly-by-night companies, so they're not officially recognized. Sometimes you can just create a piece of paper that's saying you have a TESOL certificate. So it's really good to go with a reputable company which has a track record, have testimonies of literally hundreds, if not thousands, of students, and they have to teach you the core basics. Usually, what you learn is the basics of grammar. Because what happens is most of us who speak English or another language, we know it just because we've learned it as kids, but we've never actually learned the formal grammar of sentence structure, syntax, all of these grammatical rules, which we take for granted as a native speaker. So we learn actually how to explain the grammar properly. And a lot of people ask us questions that we have no idea how to answer. So we'll get back to you, and you look it up online and then you answer.
That's what happened to me. Yeah, that's what happened to me. There was a bunch of us around this table. They all spoke Polish, and then one turned to me and said, "What's this rule?" And in this sentence, and was like, "I don't know what the rule is." And they looked at the next person, and they didn't know. None of us knew what the rule was. This was just the way we said it, and we just said, "This is the way we say it." We don't know why or how, or we can't explain the rule and how it works. And in fact, it kind of breaks most of the rules. And and they were like, "You don't know." I said, "You told me that I didn't have to know grammar. I just had to know how to speak English." But you're right. Like, we learn it and we don't necessarily know the rules of doing it. And that's actually another area where it's a bit of a controversy in the teaching English, is because sometimes they focus so much on the grammar that the actual communication doesn't occur, which is what I was doing. I was actually communicating and teaching communication with the students as opposed to the grammar. But it can be a lot of fun because usually they're very motivated pupils, and they're very excited about learning English.
I'm glad you brought up that example there. I would throw it back at them saying, how much of the grammar rules do you know of Polish, but or Japanese in my case? But a quick differential. So there's something called TESOL and TEFL, and I want to just differentiate how are they different. So TESOL is teaching English as a second language. TEFL is teaching English as a foreign language. So the easiest way to explain this is if someone from Asia, the Middle East, Africa, South America came to a native English-speaking country, they would be considered speak English as a second language. Their native tongue might be Japanese, Korean, Chinese, a Middle Eastern Arabic tongue. It could be Spanish, Portuguese, etc. So they're coming to like an English-speaking country, and their second language is English. Their first language is actually those languages I mentioned. So that's TESOL. TEFL is if I, as a teacher, go into that foreign land and I bring in English as a foreign language to teach them. Because obviously Japan, the native language is Japanese. In France, it's French. In most of South America, it's Spanish. In Brazil, it's Portuguese. In the Middle East, it's Arabic, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So if I, as a native teacher, go into these countries and teach them, that's considered TEFL. So I just want to differentiate TESOL and TEFL. And now I want to differentiate a little bit about teaching English in person versus online. So one way, obviously, of making money online, making money as English teachers, to go to a country and teach there for a contract of anywhere from like a month or a week, like Scott did, to like a little bit longer, 6 months, 1 year, 2 to 3 years. The other thing you can do is actually teach online, and you can teach one-on-one through things like Skype, Google Hangouts, Zoom, etc. So that's a way to teach English online. So I recommend if you're choosing offline, pick the country you want. I mean, obviously, hot markets are Japan, Korea, China, Taiwan. The Middle East is a hot market. We actually have an interview where I interviewed someone from Oman, which we can put a link to as well. This is actually for another project that Scott and I are working on. It's called Digital Nomad Mastery, the podcast. And we interviewed digital nomads from around the world. And we had a fascinating interview with the ESL teacher who did it both in Korea and then in Oman. So we can put a link to that one as well.
Wonderful. Yeah, I think you covered it. And you're right. I actually ran into a person in Morocco who was working with someone in Japan on their, they had a speech that they had to do. in English. So she worked with him to improve his English, to enunciate everything properly so that he could do his talk and not lose face. So yeah, one-on-one tutoring is another really good way to do it. Plus, you have total control of your time, right? Which is really, really cool.
Absolutely. And I want to also just say this. You can teach English, but guess what? You can teach other languages. You can be a Spanish teacher, you can be a Russian teacher, you can be a Chinese teacher, Japanese, Korean, or Arabic teacher, etc. Because there's a big need for people going to South America and they want to learn Spanish and they have no idea where to start. You know, a case in point is me. I'm traveling around South America and I have no idea how to start learning Spanish. So if someone approached me and saying, "Hey, would you like to get on a Skype call and learn Spanish for, whatever, $10 an hour?" I'd be like, "Let's do it." As maybe a non-native English speaker, you could actually teach to other speakers your native tongue and get income as well. So I just want to throw that out there as well.
Cool. All right. Well, that takes us to the end of this lecture, and we'll see you in the next one.